Welcome back. I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for being with us here on Law and Crime. It is the lunch hour in the double murder trial of YNW Melly. So that means we are taking your questions here on the lunch break. So keep them coming to us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And we'll get to as many of them as we can throughout the lunch hour. When they took that lunch break, the ME, the medical examiner, was on the stand. So that should be some interesting testimony that we hear once the lunch break resumes. Our next question, at Queen of 4 PF from Twitter asks, are the prosecutors going to come up with or have anything interesting to say? I think we are all feeling that they have no interesting evidence or points thus far. I think the prosecution would disagree with that, Terry. So what is your response to at Queen of 4 PF's question? She's thinking they don't have anything interesting to say, the prosecution.
Well, I do think the prosecution has tried to make some points here. Obviously, they put on a gun expert, they put on a DNA expert, they put on, the detective who basically is the gang expert. And what they are trying to do at this point is establish that Melly was in a gang, and they think they've done that. They said that Polo, who is the witness, essentially makes his determinations not just based on one piece of evidence, but based on corroborating evidence. So not just the pictures that you see where Melly is doing the gang signs, but also these emails, these text messages, the conversations where people are reaching out to him. And although he doesn't respond immediately, he has responded. So they're trying to say that he is doing this, implying that the motive is because it was gang related. So they've made a couple of points. I think the ME actually is going to be a witness who is very good for them, because she has stated prior to the jury coming in that she can tell where that first bullet killed each of those individuals, Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas. So I think that'll be a very good point for the prosecution.
It'll be a very interesting point, I think. And the ME is also going to testify about the stippling found on the victims' faces. And you only get stippling, that's the marks left from a firearm being fired, if it's at close range. It has to be within a certain number of feet. Our next question is also about the ME, Bob Bianchi, and that goes to you. It's referencing the testimony of the medical examiner. It comes from Jessica Ann on Facebook. What does showing these photos have to do with proving Melly did the shooting? Anyone could have shot them with the same results.
That's a great question. Well, first of all, the prosecutors always argue when they want to admit these pictures. Let's face it, it has a visceral effect on the jury, but they're only allowed to be in if it's relevant to proving a point necessary to establish an element of the state's case. And the state has to prove not only that the cause and manner of death was homicide, they also can try to use that to show who is the person who did it. But to the point, will this medical examiner be able to do that? Right now, what I'm listening to on our show with our awesome guests and with you, Anjanette, is maybe it was him, maybe it wasn't, maybe he was in a gang, maybe he wasn't. But does this prove who did it? And moreover, keep in mind, defense attorneys in death penalty cases, their mantra is keep them alive another hour, another minute, another day. And if they can't prove what the motive is, you just can't say he's in a gang, therefore he did it. If they can't prove the motive, could have been anything. Could have been over a girlfriend, assuming he even did it. Could have been over money, assuming that he even did it. If you can't prove it was as a result of a gang order, which to me, from my knowledge of the gang things, sounds very unusual unless a higher up ordered it for a gang-related reason. The government doesn't have that proof, and that goes to one of their aggravating factors that they're trying to prove for the imposition of the death penalty. So these are all weaknesses and why I wouldn't have brought it as a death penalty case. But good question. We'll have to wait to see if the medical examiner, in all my years, I've never seen a medical examiner be able to pinpoint things with that exactitude. Maybe this will be the first case.
Mm-hmm. This is a really good question, and I think it's coming to us from Canada. It's from Teresa Coakley, and I believe she's got a little Canadian flag there. So thank you for watching. If it was a drive-by, Teresa asks Mina, why not just call the police, emergency services? Why drive to the hospital? Did they ditch the weapons and come up with a plan? That's a good question. I mean, if you think you've been shot at a drive-by, you go to safety and maybe like call 911. Instead, they drove to the ER.
I will say this, there's a celebrity involved here. And a lot of the times, from what I've seen, when there are celebrities involved in any kind of drama, a lot of the times the people around them try to protect the celebrity. So in this case, there's clear evidence that shows Melly getting into this car. There's clear camera footage and camera evidence that shows the cell phones being there together and traveling down the highway, right? But in this case, say something did happen, whether it was the shooting that happened within the car or a drive-by shooting. Melly, as a celebrity, would want to distance himself from this. And a lot of the times we see that. I've seen it in other cases where celebrities are protected because this is what happens, right? When celebrities become involved in something, it becomes big, it becomes news. If this wasn't a celebrity, would we be talking about this to the extent that we're talking about it? So that is an excellent question. You know, if you have no guilt, why not just call the police at that moment? But I think what we have to factor in is the fact that Melly is a celebrity. He is an up and coming artist, and I would not put it past for the people in Melly's lives or life to try to protect him and say, hey, we don't want us to associate you with this. Let's remove you from the car. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I've seen it happen many a times with, especially if you're in a group. They're all in that YNW group. They're all friends. Right. So I've seen it many times where the friends try to protect the celebrity.
But I guess just the shock of it, Mina, you know, these are your two lifelong friends, Juvie and Sack Chaser. They came up together making all of this music, and your friends have been like just slaughtered in front of you, you know, and wouldn't you be like trying to do whatever you could to help them then?
Right, and we don't know what happened in the car. I mean, there is footage, there is evidence that states that he was pacing. I think they said something around the lines of like 1,000 steps. We don't know what that timeline was. We don't know where this shooting happened, and we don't know what the reaction to the shooting was, right? At this point, all we have is all these different sets of this different set of evidence that they're trying to pinpoint everything, but we're not quite seeing the full picture here. So I don't know where the shooting happened. I don't know how it happened. You know, that's a mystery in itself. So I don't know what is an appropriate response to that because I don't know the full details of what happened with this shooting.
Yeah. Well, we know the state's saying it happened inside the car, that the drive-by was staged after. Obviously, Bortland said we were the victims of a drive-by, mentions nothing about, you know, these are all things the jury's going to have to determine. They determine what the truth is here. Tammy Trigg from YouTube, Terry Austin, is the jury sequestered?
No, the jury is not sequestered. They're coming in and out every day. I know for a fact this morning one of them had trouble getting here on time, but generally speaking, they have been here on time. They leave in the evening around 5 o'clock every day. They take a lunch break. The judge is very attentive to their needs. Usually it's around noon. This is why we're doing the noon break here. But yes, they have the freedom to come and go. The judge does admonish them each and every time they enter and leave that courtroom, asking them whether or not, you know, anyone has listened to anything and telling them before they leave to make sure that they do not listen to social media, that only the evidence that they see inside the trial is evidence that they need to be considering. So they're not sequestered. We're trusting them the way we trust our system to work. Maybe when they're deliberating, they will be, but not at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe during the actual penalty phase, if we get to that point, they possibly might be sequestered at that point too. Different states do things differently, depending on, you know, when you get to the penalty phase or not. Here's one for you, Bob, from YouTube. Daj, DAG, I think that's Daj, is asking, if it's required for the jurors to be impartial, which it is, why does it seem as if it's not required for the witnesses?
Well, Listen, we don't live in a perfect world. The witnesses are supposed to be impartial, i.e. the witnesses are supposed to tell the truth. But I can tell you from many years of doing this that you can literally have witnesses that watch the same exact event and they come up with two completely different conclusions. And I've come to the belief when I was younger, I used to say, well, one of them's lying and one of them's not. I've come to the belief that people have the capacity to have tunnel logic and confirmation bias, and they genuinely believe what it is they're saying. But the witnesses are supposed to be impartial, and that is why we have the greatest engine to get to the truth for people who are that are not being truthful, and that is the art of cross-examination. So you can't mandate that a witness is going to be impartial. And let's be honest, when I'm a prosecutor and I've got police officers and detectives who investigated a case, they believe the person is guilty. So I guess you could say they have partiality, but they say they're basing that upon a given set of facts. That and lying are two different things. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the closest I can get to it.
Yeah, and there are different witnesses for different functions, right? Expert witnesses versus lay witnesses, things of that nature. So good question, though. So